As Ukrainian defense reported, Ukrainian warriors continued to eliminate Russian occupiers by FPV drones, personnel, dugouts, weapons, and equipment. We also wrote that the Russians used a homemade 324mm rocket system on the battlefield in Ukraine. At the same time, Kyiv has stepped up drone attacks on Russian cities, including Moscow, which have been viewed as an attempt by Ukraine to destabilize the nation. The Ukrainian Special Forces Unit is a part of the SBU and was credited with targeting Russian positions and driving Moscow's forces underground in eastern Ukraine. Little information has been given about the covert unit, though the SBU has regularly published videos of their attacks. Meanwhile, this dramatic body cam captures brave Ukrainian soldiers storming trenches in Bakhmut. The 2nd Ukrainian Assault Brigade published a video on Wednesday, purportedly showing soldiers storming Russian trenches near the eastern Ukrainian city of Bakhmut. In the terrifying PO footage captured by soldiers' body cam, a group of soldiers, the Galician platoon of the 1st Company of the 2nd Assault Battalion, fire into trenches on the front line. Ukraine claimed that its forces made advances in various sections of the front line with Russia. Near the fiercely contested city of Bakhmut, the east remains the epicenter of hostilities. In the direction of Bakhmut, our troops switched from defensive to offensive. Over the past day, we have advanced from 200 to 1,100 meters around 653 600F in various sections of the Bakhmut direction, Ukrainian Deputy Defense Minister Hanna Maliar said on Telegram. Separately, the Russian Defense Ministry claimed in a statement that its forces over the past hours, the armed forces of Ukraine AFU have been attacking the village of Kupani with the support of artillery, but significant progress has not been achieved. Fierce fighting also unfolded in the village of Rabatino. According to Warganzo war correspondents, after the artillery shelling, Ukrainian troops were able to move slightly toward the village of Verbov. This indicates an attempt by the armed forces of Ukraine to expand the springboard for active offensive operations in this region. On the other hand, the armed forces of the Russian Federation carried out a number of artillery strikes on the positions of the armed forces of Ukraine. Attacks were made on various settlements, including Plavny, Novodanilovka, Malaya Tokmachka, Cherevnoye, Gulyapolskoye, Zheleznodorozhny, and Gulyapol. The situation in the Zaporizhzhia direction remains extremely difficult, as the armed forces of Ukraine have almost come close to the key defensive line, which, given the width of the front, creates a real threat of a breakthrough. And so therefore they're actually quite easy to train around and also themselves quite mobile. And so therefore you can get people deployed very quickly and be able to actually operate very much in a mobile way. It's no surprise then that GMs have become a defining symbol of the Ukrainian cause, exemplified in the online memes of Javelin, among others. The weapons represent vital Western support for the war effort and the seemingly David V's Goliath struggle with which Ukraine is engaged. That their video feeds can be so easily shared on social media should not be underestimated. The posts solidify the idea that Ukraine is winning the war. But why have GMs been so successful, and is their role changing? To understand the effectiveness of modern GMs, we first need to go right back to the inception of anti-tank weaponry. Ever since the birth of the tank during the First World War, there has been an arms race between anti-tank weapons and tank armor. One of the most important developments was heat, or high-explosive, anti-tank ammunition. This example comes from a German Panzerschreck from the Second World War, itself a copy of the American bazooka. Heat rounds, also known as shape charges, have their explosive in a hollow cone with a thin metal lining. When the explosive ignites, it turns the lining into a jet of liquid metal, which moves fast enough to penetrate even the thickest of armor. But with those advancements came an evolution in tank armor. Ukraine's forces have pushed deeper into Russian defensive lines in the country's south, Kyiv said today, as footage emerged of intense close-quarters combat between Ukraine's armed forces and Moscow's invading infantrymen. Kyiv launched a grinding counter-offensive in June after stockpiling Western-supplied weapons and building up assault battalions. Unlike two rapid assaults last summer, Ukraine's armies have made slow progress through dense defenses and minefields. Nevertheless, gains have been made, and on Monday Kyiv confirmed the armed forces of Ukraine had liberated the village of Robotin on the southern front, the latest in a series of villages liberated as Ukraine pushes towards the Sea of Azov. Russia unleashed a series of large attacks across Ukraine on Wednesday, including a barrage on Kyiv that city officials called the most powerful strike on the capital since the spring. The deadly attacks come as Ukraine has recently made significant gains in its ongoing counteroffensive against Russian forces. On Monday, Ukraine officials said its forces had liberated Robotin, a village in the Zaporizhia region that was said to have played a tactically important role in Russia's defensive line. The settlement's liberation came after Ukraine's military retook control of Urozhan, a village in the Donetsk region that was key to Russia's supply line, earlier this month. By contrast, the NLAWs being used in Ukraine use a predicted line-of-sight system. The user tracks the target for 2 to 3 seconds before firing, then the guidance system calculates the flight path to the target while the soldier gets to safety. Meanwhile, other HGMs like the Javelin are even more advanced. So what happens is the Javelin system projects a missile. Once it's clear to the user that missile then ignites and does an arc on top of the tank. And so therefore you're targeting the weakest layer of armor. The other systems target over tanks in order to do something similar, but they're actually not able to detonate in the same kind of way as the Javelin system. But ATGMs aren't just highly effective modern weapons. They're also a great fit for Ukrainian strategy. They provide a cost-effective way of countering Russia's huge stocks of armored vehicles with which Ukraine cannot compete. In the early phases of the war, reservists like these ones in Kyiv were trained with a plethora of anti-tank weapons like NLAWs and AT-4s. Both of those systems actually are kind of point-and-shoot weapon systems. Has been on the hunt for Russian armor using the stun-guided rocket system to destroy military vehicles worth millions of dollars. According to Ukraine, Russia has lost over 4,000 tanks and 8,000 armed personnel carriers during the full-scale invasion. Ukrainian special forces have entered and started mopping up operations in the village of Robotin as part of a counter-offensive in Zaporizhia Oblast. Russians utilized their prime tanks, but Ukrainians broke through the defenses with Bradley EFFs. Ukrainian special forces have killed 550 more Russians and destroyed 6 tanks and 11 drones belonging to the Russian forces over the past 24 hours. Ukrainian intelligence has released aerial footage, which it claims shows the incapacitation of a number of Russian tanks, as it boasts that the mysterious Ukrainian Special Forces unit had on its own successfully taken out 2 regiments since the invasion began 18 months ago. In early 2023, Ukrainian soldiers typically use Javelin or anti-actual anti-tank missiles to destroy Russian tanks. We've witnessed numerous epic scenes of Russian tanks having their turrets blown off, soaring high into the air, and tanks being torn into pieces of scrap metal. But it soon became apparent that using the Javelin missile wasn't the most effective technique to take out tanks. Better and more affordable methods exist. We can see today that the threat to tanks and armored vehicles is far larger than a little kamikaze drone carrying a grenade. Today, I'll provide you with concrete examples of how Ukraine is fundamentally altering public perceptions of contemporary combat. Ukrainian soldiers started running out of Javelin anti-tank missiles during the counteroffensive. FPV drones, however, proved to be a fully functional replacement for Javelin anti-tank rockets. Here's how it works. Let's contrast the Javelin missile's flight with the kamikaze drones. Previously, to destroy a tank, it had to be within your line of sight, meaning you had to see it with your own eyes. The Javelin missile has a special direct guidance optical system. You could hit the launch button when you spotted an opposing tank, and the missile would then travel directly in its direction. A small drone can now be used to detect a tank while it is hidden. The tank may not always be in your direct line of sight and may be far distant. It can go through buildings, on city streets, or behind hills or forests. You can spot the tank while hiding by employing a drone, and by utilizing special goggles and a joystick, you can point your drone directly at the tank to damage it. On paper, Ukrainian soldiers should have been able to get close to Russian armor, but in reality, Russian tanks moved along main roads and exposed fields without infantry, artillery, or aircraft protecting them. Ukrainian forces with ATGMs were able to pick off the first and last vehicles in slow-moving Russian columns before artillery finished off the rest. Prosecuting a ground war without air support is extremely difficult. In fact, what's developed in the case of Ukraine is that we see a level of air denial to the Russians, and that means that your ground forces become particularly vulnerable to mobile weapon systems. It's really starting to become a quite advanced package. Weapons like the Javelin and the Stugna use tandem heat charges. They use a small initial explosive to activate the explosive reactive armor before a second main charge arrives to penetrate the armor itself. Modern ATGMs also have much improved guidance systems. This LAW-80, the precursor to the modern NLAW, has an integrated spotting rifle with 9mm tracer rounds to improve the probability of a first-time hit. Serhiy Popko, the head of the Kiev City Military Administration, said Russian combat drones targeted the capital city from various directions before cruise missiles were launched from aircraft during the overnight attack on Kiev. Popko said at least 2 people were killed and 3 others injured during the attack on Kiev. Ukraine's State Emergency Service reported that the assault caused fires and destruction of residential buildings in and around the capital. The Ukrainian Air Force said the nationwide attacks included 28 cruise missiles launched from 295 BIMS bombers, as well as 16 Shade-136, 131 drones targeting the Kiev, Cherkasy, Odessa, Mykolaiv, and Zhytomyr regions. The Air Force said all 28 cruise missiles were down by its defenses, as well as 15 of the drones. Russia has faced stiff resistance from the Ukrainian forces in the war that has been going on for more than 18 months. This is the türkiye, a Ukrainian-made anti-tank guided missile, or ATGM. Our Ukrainian soldiers used to great effect against Russian vehicles near Bakhmut in the south of the country. Alongside Javelins and NLAWs, which have received far more press attention, ATGMs like the Stugny have proved highly effective during the war in Ukraine. They've destroyed countless Russian armored vehicles and provided endless material for viral social media clips. But that does not mean that they are risk-free for their operators. What we see in particular are these anti-tank missile systems is that, in many cases, they're somewhere between 500 to 1,000 meters. Of course, that puts you within the range of a tank and its weapon systems. But we also see a fire and forget quality to them that means that you could be quite quick in being able to move off. That mobility is kind of fundamental to the way that we think about kind of modern warfare. But there's another reason why Ukrainian ATGMs have been so effective, and that's because the Russian strategy has been playing directly into their hands. Such a drone can be equipped with a 1.5 kilogram grenade to deal serious damage to the tank or any other armored vehicle. Additionally, you can direct the drone exactly at the tank's weak points, such as its fuel tank. The Russians are facing non-stop military losses on Ukrainian soil. About 260,270 aggressors' troops were eliminated, 6,409 air targets of invaders were shot down, and thousands of tanks, armored vehicles, and trucks were destroyed by the defenders of Ukraine. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian military is making progress in Tavria's direction, destroying occupiers, as well as their weapons and military equipment and warehouses with ammunition. Artillery units of the defense forces of the Tavria direction performed 1248 fire missions during the day. Brigadier General Oleksandr Ternavsky, commander of the Tavria Operational and Strategic Group of Troops, wrote on his official Telegram channel. Also, Ukrainian defense forces liquidated 79 invaders in a day and wounded 153 in the Tavria direction. Thus, the total losses of the enemy in killed and wounded amounted to 232 people. The Russians also suffered heavy losses in combat material. 27 units of enemy military equipment were destroyed. In particular, 6 tanks, 6 armored fighting vehicles, 8 artillery systems and mortars, 1 multiple launch rocket system LRS, 1 anti-tank guided missile system 1 SPAG, 1 unit, 2 vehicles, and 1 unit of special equipment, Brigadier General Oleksandr Tarnavsky noted. Additionally, 6 enemy ammunition depots and 1 command observation post were destroyed. The Ukrainian defense forces are working. Glory to Ukraine, the commander said.